Hey folks, and welcome to a daily rating special. On today's show, Vince will rate and review what he believes are the essential stop-motion pictures. These films are benchmarks for stop-motion movies, and Vince will take us through the decades reviewing 5 trend-setting films in the genre. These stop-motion films are King Kong, directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad by Nathan Juran, Jason and the Argonauts by John Chafee, The Nightmare Before Christmas by Henry Selick, and Kubo and the Two Strings, directed by Travis Knight. So stay tuned and enjoy this special. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
Tommy boy, how's it going?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited for today's special.
Oh, for sure.
This was the homework of all homeworks that you've done for us today.
It's been in the oven for a minute for sure.
We've been working on it really hard. So, folks, again, this is stop motion pictures, and we always do 5 films on our episodes. We didn't need it to be 5. If it was 10, we would do part 1 and 2. But there was 6 on this list. 1 got cut because it didn't make the cut.
Yeah, it did not.
And so again, these are kind of what you say, or just like here are the trendsetters, what started and what kept this genre going, how it continued to innovate itself, kind of.
Exactly,
yeah.
And I think it's important for stop motion because you look at it and you say, oh, that can't compete with CGI. I think hopefully by the end of this, folks at home, you see that there is a place for stop motion in modern day. And not only that, it's a medium. It's for storytelling. It's not just it's not just a style or a tech that
it's got using. A place. It's got a place. It's its own thing, and
exactly.
I definitely love that, and it's important to note, folks, that maybe these films, and I don't know the scores yet, but I'm assuming just because they're trendsetters or something like that also might not mean they get the greatest scores. Not like we're dealing with 80s or 85s.
Yeah.
But again, it's just these are important. These are ones that are doing something different than the last guys that's improving upon the genre.
Exactly.
Right?
Studying the industry, how it's evolving, how it can be viewed in modern day, and the mark that a lot of creators put, the stamp that they put on each of these films. So we cover a lot of years too.
It's oh my gosh, I love
33 to 2016. So that was
cool.
Fun as just a project in itself. I mean, I really love this. These specials are what I live for. It's wonderful.
It's a blast, and I think the reason also why we do we really think that they're beneficial for everyone listening. I think this would be great to listen to.
Sure.
I would love to go online and see a list like this.
Yeah.
And especially because it's not like we just slapped this together. We didn't go and Google or Bing what are the most essential stop motion pictures. You know what I mean? Like you sat down and did some serious research.
Oh, for sure.
You watched hours of content about the films and about the industry,
right?
Before even digging into some of the films.
Yeah, because I'm damn sure not an animator. So as far as technical advancements, I really needed to do research. But it really was a joy to do because I've loved stop motion for a while, and I think creatively as well. I got to challenge my own ratings of how does this stand up in modern day. So this is hopefully will open your eyes to the storytelling possibilities of stop motion.
And that is interesting of just noting that because, again, as we always say, we're in the here and now. And it's funny watching a movie from 1933, from 58 to 63, because although they might have huge marks, it's just because I feel like people that rate them today feel like they need to, because it's just oh my gosh, it's just
the expectation.
Exactly. It's we have to rate it high, but we're in the here and now, and I can't wait to see kind of how especially these older ones held up. So I think we're going to start right away with it.
Sure.
Again, we go back to 1933. This is King Kong. What do we have?
So, I mean, just inspired so much. Obviously, Japanese filmmakers with Gojira, or Godzilla, as it's known in the West. Many, many monster rampage movies are spawned from this in the States as well. And probably most important of why King Kong is on this list, in addition to its credits for stop motion and really being one of the biggest impacts on viewing audiences at the time, most importantly, it was an inspiration for what largely is considered the godfather of stop-motion animation, which is Ray Harryhausen. Ray is not in this production. We will touch on him in our next two segments, but definitely a format, or rather, not a format, a figure to keep an eye on and keep an ear open for, because definitely he is our first highlight of an auteur or a really creative powerhouse in this space.
Okay.
Story-wise, it's almost folklore at this point.
Yeah,
we have
that's true.
A filmmaker and crew visiting Skull Island. They find a society in which worships King Kong, and from there the stage is set to give 1930s audiences the thrill of a lifetime. I mean, I was probably most shocked by King Kong of how much it represents the Peter Jackson King Kong that we get in the 2000s.
Really? Or I guess how much Peter Jackson...
Oh, for sure. Yeah, tried to just really do a beat-for-beat remake. I think it's surprising how much Kong's DNA is right in the beginning here. You know what I mean?
Really?
As the origin. It was really interesting. And watching a 1933 film could be jarring to begin with. Watching a 1933 blockbuster is really putting that, that modern day watching to the test.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. With that modern day watching, there's almost an interesting theme in the story beats before we get into the effects and stop motion of female acting exploitation. This is the setting is actually specified to be recovering from the Great Depression. There is obviously in real life, King Kong was such a landmark film because it was such a fantasy and an escapism away from the Great Depression at the time, and for people to be transported in the theaters. And I think for this odd, I wouldn't say odd, but this modern viewing of the theme of acting exploitation, the characters even recognize it themselves in the film, that it's not right, of how our female lead is taken and used as bait, basically, for Kong, to capture him and try to ultimately get him to that set piece in New York then. So very interesting watch, but honestly, even though we have some characters set up, this is as much as a monster action movie as any monster action film.
Really?
It is amazing to see. It's a who's who of dinosaurs and creatures for Kong to face off against. Yeah, it's action-packed. And that's a 1933 film. And
that's awesome.
It was very surprising. Again, even the newest iterations of Kong are still, just trying to put him up against as many matches as possible. And I'm talking like at least over half a dozen we're talking about as far as matchups in this film.
Freaking awesome.
It's action-packed. And it's so weird to, call a film this old like that, Halfway in, I think the film's focus is completely around Kong fighting, once again, a who's who of dinosaurs that is, really, really brutal. All of this is going to be our first introduction to stop motion. Kong himself is, of course, a stop-motion figure. One of the first terms we'll come across is an armature. An armature is basically the wire frame to the clay model or the plastic model around it. So the skeleton, if you will. And, man, some interesting stuff is done with it. There is some brutal scenes. I know that sounds silly talking about goofy.
I love this.
Early stop motion. There's a jaw-breaking scene.
Really?
Kong breaks the jaw of a dinosaur and plays with it like loose and limp. I was like, whoa, this is awesome. I was stunned by it, especially for,
So this was your first viewing of it, too.
Oh, yeah.
You haven't seen this like 10 years ago or anything like that.
No, yeah. And probably avoided it realistically because I what value?
1933.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, what value would a blockbuster from the early 30s have? And I'm here to say there is appreciable aspects to it.
Awesome.
You know, one of the foundational techniques that is basically a breakthrough here, and that I'll reference for the special, is rear projection. Folks at home, you're probably, even if you're not familiar with it, you've seen rear projection. It's when footage of a scene is played behind our actors or played behind the set and played out in the studio. Classic use of this is moving background for cars. You'll see this.
Oh, you have the still vehicle, but you just have the moving. Yeah,
and the footage is rear projected behind.
Yes,
it,
okay,
cast in the scene. For stop motion, though, the figures can be either part of the background or part of the foreground, and the footage of the actors is put to the background. So they're able to move the stop motion in the foreground. Honestly, this film pioneers this footage that is this technique that is still used today. Kong often will interact both in and out of this very fluidly. Sometimes in the foreground for actors, that is them propping up a very comically large hand coming off set.
Really?
You know, especially when Kong's grabbing something.
Right.
But it really, I will say it's a foundational technique, and something that we see our first highlight, Ray Harryhausen, in the coming two films that we'll talk about, folks. A foundational technique of this rear projection, the key to it working is having some sort of bridge, some sort of interaction between, even for folks at the time, probably not very realistic stop motion, but it's creating a reality because there is some sort of crossover between the rear projection and what these stop motion figures are interacting with. That could be a knock of something. Kong's main set is on Skull Island, is a massive gate. Having that gate interact as Kong is coming out, it builds a realism around otherwise a glitchy or a sporadic stop motion.
Yes,
it.
yeah. I mean, glitchy is a good word too, because it kind of looks like that. It comes across as that,
Yeah. Especially when it comes to, they're not animating every frame though. So
right.
When it comes to, what we're looking at for stop motion, the figures are either a part of the background, a part of the foreground, like I say. Again, the pioneering here of why we're tuning into rear projection, and specifically as a inspiration for Harryhausen in years to come, is that bridge of the gap. Let's talk about the main event, though. Kong himself. Facial movements of Kong are wild. He is always moving his eyebrows. They're really going over and above to show that he's animated.
He's animated,
and he has some sort of humanity to it. It is ultimately, I think, much better than the man-in-the-suit creatures we see up until even the 50s. Because it shows that Kong has almost like a dangerous stupidity to him. There is a fantasy sold from even how goofy his face looks.
Was it jarring how jittery it was, or low frame, like small amount of frames per second?
Yeah, the facial animation specifically, it's just constantly going. His eyebrows are just jiving. They are going away. And it's even if he's not directly interacting with something, he's always just moving one or the other or both. And
I wonder if that was on purpose, or it's because that was hard to get continuity per frame. You know what I mean?
Maybe. Honestly, there was a lack of polish, certainly.
But who knows?
Yeah. I think in the end result for modern day, it does kind of, again, much like the rear projection, sell a fantasy to what all audiences would know is clearly not a giant monkey. I think it sells kind of a dangerous curiosity to him, especially when he's interacting with our female lead. There really is that fascination that Kong has, and that's not going to be sold through his brutality. That's not going to be sold, especially in 1933, for whatever kind of destruction they can do on screen. It is sold through emotion. It is sold through making a character out of a creature. And that really is what stood with so many people for this film. And I think it's definitely something to note, especially for as we are tracking the developments of it. what that means for our artists in the animation department. What does that mean to create a creature and give it some humanity to it? So, despite a man not being in Kong, a lot is done to give reactions to his movement. Kong will clench his chest in pain. He will wipe blood from his chest. As silly as it looks sometimes, this care and thought is no doubt artistry and craft in this movie. The fear is then sold by the actors in the foreground or in the background. And overall, the main appeal is really the scale and size of Kong, especially when they share the shot. Like I talked about just a moment ago, the bridging of making Kong feel real in the same scene, the same exact scene that the actors are in, is what sells the fantasy here. And it's one of the most effective tricks and most common tricks with all of stop motion. Rear projection is all over the map when it comes to Jason and the Argonauts, Seven Voyages of Sinbad, and really into even technically a follow through even into using green screen in this way, that you're keying out specific things. The technique is still there. I think for the film coming out of the Great Depression, I think this created a portal into Skull Island, specifically, a fantasy for, probably something that was near therapeutic for audiences at the time, coming off of the Great Depression, to have such a fantasy in the movie theater.
Being able to be taken away, be swept off your feet into another world,
Exactly. My argument from modern day is there is definitely still artistry. The emotion, the little reactions that Kong is given, that is the animation team. Proto as it was at the time, they are recognizing that Kong may not look realistic enough, and they have to do things to make and bridge that fantasy of making Kong real for audiences at the time. I think while, albeit a touch goofy in modern day, it's still artistry to recognize, as they were using the tools at the time, and you can recognize the progress or the care put into making the creature human. We're going to go ahead and give King Kong 1933 a 65.
All right, a 65. It's fantastic for a 33 movie.
For sure.
One question I did have. We're all familiar with the scene, Kong in New York, on and batting down the planes and everything like that. And
Empire State Building.
Right. Yep. You think about modern day films like King Kong or Godzilla or Marvel movies or something like that, where every single movie you are in a city and a city is getting totally trashed and destroyed to the point where there's no stakes. There's literally thousands of lives pretty much dying in these scenes that are just like uncredited, faceless people essentially. And it loses in importance or anything like that. Was there anything that, even with the fake monkey looking, you know what I mean? It's not like the animation CGI is like good or anything like that. There is no CGI, of course. But did it have a coolness or impactfulness? Was it just like when he got to the city or anything like that? Or was it just like, oh, here's just another movie trashing a city and it's just a little older?
I will say it loses some of the appeal of the brutality. Again, when Kong's fighting other dinosaurs or other creatures, it's kind of good. No joke. And kind of brutal. No joke. But when he gets to that city, I think that's where his interacting with the actors, or the actors just acting very scared in the background, and for this footage that's played behind or in front of Kong, that is what makes those sequences...
Loses a bit.
No, I think that's what makes those sequences good.
Oh, because of the emotion, I see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It kind of bridges the gap as far as Kong can only do so much in this set.
Right.
For that they're building up to it, so...
I love it. 65. And how acting overall?
Acting was good, and like I said, I think they're really, the scope of this project was big enough. I wasn't going to dive into kind of a modern interpretation of this movie, but I think there really could be an interesting modern lens to view this story through.
Man,
so.
that's awesome. All right, so first one, 1933, King Kong with the 65%. We're going to go ahead here and jump off a couple decades. We're in 1958. This is the seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And you say this is our second big kind of trend-setting movie, or next one in stop motion. And what do we have here? Why is it why does it take that second slot?
Absolutely. So this second slot is really the first in-color film after a historic run of films with Ray Harryhausen. This film is not directed by Ray. Neither is Jason the Argonauts, because at the time, he was exclusively an animation director and truly the godfather of taking the lessons, maybe even self-taught lessons he learned from King Kong, from his early black and white films, and taking it into full effect to make monsters, more than monsters. This movie is a true benchmark because it really is the culmination of a lot of the tricks he learned and really pioneered in his black and white films that were everything from monster films destroying cities to flying UFOs and very, very campy 50s stuff. But Seventh Voyage of Sinbad is a benchmark for so many reasons because it really is a culmination of just everything he does right in those black and white films. This, man, do I wish movies are still named like this?
Really?
Seventh Voyage. It's just so there's an epicness.
There's an
about
I was just about to say epicness. Yeah.
How do we not name films like this anymore? But part of the appeal of the classicness of it is Bernard Herrmann on the soundtrack, killing it as usual.
Awesome.
Yeah, love his style. The whole feel just sounds so earnest and so classic in its fantasy. There is, comedy sometimes, but it just takes itself seriously in a good way, though. It knows it's telling a classic story, which I really enjoy. And that's really sold by Bernard Herrmann's soundtrack. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad is a full-on fantasy adventure. It is separate from the written tales. Not that I read any Sinbad,
right?
But
me neither.
Right. So it is separate, though, and following the tussling of Sinbad with a magician named Sakura, who curses his princess and forces Sinbad to a deadly island of monsters.
Okay. Another island of monsters.
Oh, yeah. The island of monsters is going to be real common in Ray Harryhausen's in his films. I think my high praise here of the technical work should fully offset the dated aspects of this film, because there are definitely some dated aspects of this film. Don't get me wrong, this is very much a 50s movie. Punches are probably miles away from anyone's face. The props are hysterical. There is, obviously this being kind of an Arab tale, there is a genie. And that genie lamp looks like a hospital bedpan. I have no idea what prop department was thinking they were doing.
Oh my God, that's
There's
funny.
There's this very wide berth on the end of this genie lamp that just looks like a bedpan. I don't... You know what I mean? I like OG Star Trek. There's a lot of creative prop work, but it's definitely, those are some of the goofy aspects. I can't stress enough, though, the praise of the technical powerhouse that this is, and still, again, has artistry in how Ray is crafting the many, many monsters on this island has a place for modern eyes. As far as what we're looking at for some of the technical aspects, Ray Harryhausen has a branding trick that he does to his movies at the time.
Okay.
In his black and white movies, he is constantly being compared to men in monster type of films, men in suits, monster suits, and is being lost in the shuffle at the time. Dynamation is the branding that Ray and his team put to the movies, and specifically it refers to his very unique creature work, his very animated kind of humanistic creatures that he creates.
Okay.
But also specifically the rear projection techniques that he has learned from King Kong. That is Dynamation, where those two meet.
Interesting.
And if anything, we'll touch on many times in the special that stop motion is defined by two technologies meeting and creating something special. I'm actually very excited to talk about when we get into some more
so he
modern stuff.
Would you say he mastered this, or he's the one who took these two together and melded them.
He's the one that at least brands it.
Okay.
Dynamation is something from his production studio, that type of
Okay.
that word. And it's in front of all these films. It's in the opening credits.
So with Ray's films, with Harryhausen's films,
Mm-hmm.
you know, okay, so he's writing them, and he's also just like he's got his hands all like again. He's not the director.
Mm-hmm.
He's not apparently he's uncredited on the writer as well.
Wow.
But basically, the big thing is he is completely behind the camera through and through.
Behind the
not
camera,
not directing, but like really directing of operations. Kind
exactly.
of.
Yeah. Animation director, animation department, especially for these early ones. His labor of love is just creating monsters.
So cool.
And you know, it makes sense why he wouldn't necessarily be directing, because if you think about it, especially for these two, we are before the age that there is full stop motion. You know, there's a few full stop motion films, but nowhere near the prowess of Ray is doing, with more of a big Hollywood appeal of actors, and now these actors are against these monsters.
And interweaving them, yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So that is where the focus is for Ray, because he's doing so much and making such a mark on these movies, even though they're live action and only part of the action is this stop motion. So that's where he is really our focus. And you look at anything as far as anyone that's even dipped their toes as far as incorporating stop motion into their films, Harryhausen is a name that is brought up as a godfather of this.
Yeah,
for
he
what
really is,
does.
huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So cool.
And maybe let me give you some perspective to that. I think we see a great example of what he's done to, you know, again, take monsters beyond monsters is in the Cyclops of this film. Not only is it truly gigantic on screen, being rear projected for the actors to interact with, to react with it, but the design of the monster specifically distinguishes itself from the possibility of being a man in the suit. Dynamation as well, again, is a marketing branding technique that Ray's house is doing. So when it comes to the creatures he's designing now in a business decision, he is creating more interesting and intricate monsters through the stop motion to make sure that audience members have no question in their mind, there is no way there is a man in that suit.
Okay.
And that is really the selling point of Dynamation.
Very cool.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure that helped you, like you said, the scale of this specific creature was massive as well. So much has been cool also. Like audiences back then, seeing a creature looking like that huge.
Absolutely.
And all-consuming, basically. Yeah.
The Cyclops is so great, too, and I'm glad to highlight it. You know, as far as how they achieve this not alien look, but this you know, fantasy, truly fantastical look. It's achieved through having hooved goat legs by physical proportions impossible for a human. It goes so much farther than, let's say, if you were to watch an old Godzilla film. There's no doubt there's a man in the suit, and that's truly, you know, correct to the production, but it's so interesting that creature design is being pushed further because of a business decision, ultimately,
that's
to
awesome.
distinguish themselves.
Honestly, that's awesome.
Absolutely. Among peers, among the film landscape, I love that aspect, and Dynamation is just such a golden age Hollywood type of branding, you know, Dynamation, you know? So it really enjoyable for that. Impossible for human proportions, Ray also learns from his 1933 inspiration that physical reactions are key to making the monster feel real. This Cyclops will flinch in pain. I mean, almost to the point of total ripoff. It will clench for ways at his body as they're attacking the creature in the same way that King Kong did in 33.
Very cool.
He is definitely learning from his clear inspirations at the time, or what he grew up with to inspire him to work in stop motion, which is fantastic. This care is why the production methods are artistry, and it's seriously why I believe this style is timeless in the right hands. If there is care being put into so many aspects around design and habit and almost mentality of a otherwise lifeless figure, that is artistry. Does that make sense?
No,
You get where I'm
absolutely.
coming from?
No, and it's very cool. And like you said, I mean, they're branding it. This film was definitely gunning for it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so on the front cover, it says, too, the sheer magic of Dinorama.
Oh,
It
no,
says,
that's great.
now recreates the most spectacular adventures ever filmed.
Wow.
So they're really pushing it. Honestly,
Yeah.
this movie sounds like a blast.
Yeah, Sinbad's a really good time.
Because it's just like creature and then another creature, and then
Yep.
it's very cool.
Absolutely. It's a little silly when it comes to some aspects of it, but it's interesting because beyond animation, Ray is also in truly a proto special effects department. A iconic rear projection in this film is that the princess that is cursed shrinks down in size. So instead of a stop motion rear projection, we just have actor on actor and her being very small with our main lead. So
Very cool.
He's all over the map, and that's why special
truly
effects
is.
really do consider him a godfather for this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, these are the early days. It's green screening before green screening was a thing. I mean,
Absolutely.
very cool.
Absolutely. I have to talk about my favorite scene, though, and it is a confrontation with Sinbad and a full-on xylophone spooky skeleton. It is so great.
The class, yeah. I think a lot of people, even if they just were shown a clip of this, would be like, "Oh, that rings a bell. I think I've seen that before."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially for Jason, in just a moment, we'll focus on that as well. The skeleton scenes are very iconic. in
Right,
that
right.
And kind of burn themselves into your eyes. We see this expanded in Jason, like I said, but this one is special specifically. The wire frame under every stop motion figure is their skeleton. And the key to the creature's fantasy is the difference for a human skeleton. The key to the fantasy of the Cyclops is that it does not have a human framework.
Right, okay.
But once again, the artistry of Ray is like, well, we want to put in this skeleton set piece. How do we use this creatively
crazy.
being a human archetype, being a
Yeah,
human form? What we do is have a design around this one-on-one scene where the stand-in for the skeleton at the time was a famous Italian stunt swordsman named Enzo Greco. It's so amazing. So amazing. On top of this stop motion, having the skeleton be stiff and imposing and almost supernaturally moving, we have real impact in this fight scene because of real impact on shields around the environment. Again, if the footage of the skeleton is going to be projected onto live footage of where, or actually rather reverse in this scene, to have interaction with the setting. For instance, Sinbad throws his shield at one point, and you see it crash and crack off the skeleton shield and then interact with potions and wizardly things on the wall. There's such a follow-through in creating
cool.
the fantasy around this skeleton being real for our characters. And I mean, if you're going to hire a famous Italian swordsman to have a stand-in that he's ultimately not
He's
in
not
the
even
film.
in the film.
He's not even in the film. Very cool. And I think, again, my point in bringing this up, why I love this one specifically, is Ray is using his creative limitations. He can't make a monster out of a skeleton because it has to represent a human.
Yeah,
and
it has to be a skeleton too, which it's pretty wild actually.
Exactly.
Like thinking of what has to go into it.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of intricacy to that.
Oh, yeah.
So it is such a level of care and follow through to what the idea he's trying to sell on picture is.
It's fantastic.
It's so good.
It's a visual dance. It really is.
Absolutely. It's pure movie magic, and like many things on this list, skeletons are a key love point for me. I'll introduce my campaign, Keep Skeletons Stop Motion. You can find that on the hashtag Twitter.
GoFundMe.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, there is a lot in this film that is absolutely dated and may not hold up to the test of time, but surprisingly, and what I urge for you folks at home, stop motion isn't even close to one of them. And I argue it is the key to the timelessness of this film. We're going to go ahead and give The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad a 70 on the dot.
Ooh, okay, we're moving up here.
We
moving
are-
up. 70's pretty
we're
good.
Climbing.
Once again, acting relatively good. We have Kerwin Matthews as Sinbad. We have Kathryn Grant as the princess, carrying the roles.
Carrying the roles, I think the magician Sakura, I don't know the actor's name.
Torrin Thatcher.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it gets into kind of a little bit 50s hammy and whatnot. But again, if anything, there's such an earnestness around this is a classic story, and we are going to try to do the best justice we can to this classic story. And,
Awesome.
There's follow through on that.
I mean, and at 70%, fantastic for a 58 stop motion film.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Really, really good. We're going to keep on going. We're just 5 years now. Not that big of a gap here. We're going from 58. We're in 1963 now. This is Jason and the Argonauts.
Yes. So, Jason and the Argonauts, I have a huge nostalgia for. Trust me, I am cold and calculated. This will not come into play for the rating, but scenes of this were burned into my mind very early on, and probably just seeing it on TV once alone.
Okay.
Of course, this is the classic Greek myth of Jason and the Golden Fleece. Pelias is our antagonist, and when he receives a blessing from Zeus himself, his ambition pushes him to challenge fate itself. As far as Jason is that fate, and his quest is to find the relic of the Golden Fleece and places him in path of many a monster. Once again, we have not the stereotype, but the trope of Island of Monsters.
Island of Monsters. I love it. I kind of like it.
Where man has feared to tread, our heroes are put directly in front of the jaws and the claws of these monsters. So a little formulaic, and you may be wondering, for folks at home that maybe know some of the history of Ray Harryhausen's films, he of course does the original Clash of the Titans, which is certainly a landmark in its own right. My argument here, though, is Jason is a culmination, an amping up, a magnification of what is done in Seventh Voyage of Sinbad to create some higher stakes and really show the prowess and the care that Ray puts into these creatures.
That's a good distinction, because I think maybe people would be more. It might ring a bell more. The other picture,
for
as
sure,
far as just the movie.
It is a name,
right,
the name,
name recognition. But that's a good distinction to say. No, this one is the one that belongs on this list. Yeah,
we don't get a lot of movies like this anymore, and I think that's really why this movie stands apart for me. In addition to the landmark effects from Ray, it's a really good story, and maybe it is a bit condensed versus the actual Greek myth, but seeing Jason prepare for this quest really gives gravity to the build of the story. And once again, they hold no punches. This is a who's who of characters we would want to see in this setting. We get Zeus, we get Hercules. Hercules is in Jason's crew.
That's so good.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's
so
cool.
Great. A handful of gods up at Olympus, and really just you can tell that they had this technology, they had this inspiration with Ray's team, and they did not hold anything back. Like, this is a best of Greek myth almost.
Okay.
So some of that you may wonder, again, especially for my praise of Greek myth, why would Clash of the Titans not be on my list? I think if I had to make an argument story-wise, Jason uses this cast of Greek characters much more creatively than the original Clash of the Titans. Clash of the Titans also was not the one I dropped from this, but one that I researched extensively to call heads or tails. Are we touching on Jason or are we touching on Clash for this slot of early 70s to early 80s for this decade in stop motion? Mythical creatures here are as well used just as creatively. There are just so many monsters that are a step up from Sinbad. The Cyclops, we go from Cyclops with a lot of creature design to the Bronze Colossus. One skeleton goes into 7 skeletons. Even the Hydra head, they're all jiving on their own. It's an upgrade from the Snake Charmer scene, and quite literally times 7 work, because when you think about the motion animation needed to coordinate all the heads, it's huge. I normally wouldn't give credit to an animation or just how long something took to make. I don't think I'm one to say longer animation time or longer time just producing the movie is going to equate to quality. But there is something that you have to see in Ray's career that at this time, this 5-year gap you said between these two films, 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, from 58 to 63.
He has no peer at this time. No one is pushing him to go further.
It's him.
Exactly. It is him outdoing his own self. He is setting his own benchmarks. Yeah, and that's why we're looking at Jason over Clash of the Titans.
I love that. I love that distinction. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I mean, just to think about that, it's daunting and yet so exciting, probably, to be in his shoes at that time, where it's just like the world is your oyster. It's just like it's just a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And it's just like you're basically creating this new industry, essentially. Yeah, again, not that he created King Kong was in 33.
Yeah, technically.
But boy, probably some of the most exciting times for him.
Absolutely. If Sinbad represents our cumulative lessons he learned from his black and white films, especially with rear projection techniques and how to interact in the foreground, Jason is what I believe is the masterwork. It is very ambitious and, again, even draws to impact that we see in modern day. The rear projection techniques and the scale, let's say specifically for this Bronze Colossus, honestly, how he is putting things in the foreground, and sometimes actors are what's being put in this rear projection. Sometimes, like Sinbad, we had a small piece. We have large actors because, of course, our cast is now around Greek gods. We see this ripple. Honestly, Tom, it reminded me of the bigatures in Lord of the Rings. The same mentality.
Oh, very cool.
Casting something down intentionally to create more scale.
Awesome.
That really is where we see the ripple effect of how Ray's techniques could really echo through time and why they're worth looking at for the medium of it.
So cool.
So, as far as what we're looking at for stop motion, though, we, of course, will follow through on lessons learned. You can look at the Hydra monster and say, yeah, that's just a snake charmer scene from Sinbad, but it's just so much more complex. 7 times more complex, specifically. And now it's incorporating, again, the lessons learned from King Kong, that this creature, because it's not all moving at once, it needs to react just how an actor has to react. In an action scene, you need to have a volley of action. You need to see them. If Jason stabs the Hydra, this Hydra has to writhe in pain.
Yes.
It can't just fall to the ground. So the minor reactions that Ray is doing with these animations, again, they're multiplied by 7.
And getting more and more lifelike, too.
Absolutely.
You look at Kong, where it's just like you said, the eyebrows were going everywhere, just kind of like, big old fake monkey. Then you start to get some depth, especially with the Cyclops and everything like that, wincing a little bit, showing pain, and then this is just scaling it up again. The realism is really starting to be born, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And this is no better represented as far as the realism and what I think is the true masterpiece that will burn this movie into your memory is the skeleton scene. Like I said, there's a lot of praise for the one-on-one skeleton scene and the fight choreography of Sinbad, but Tom, let me tell you about these skeletons. The amount of time put into these figures is insane, and there is zero quality lost from the one-on-one interaction. Skeletons will fall over each other. They will vault over things.
Okay.
There's a moment that one of Jason's crew goes down, and the skeleton happily jumps over it in kind of a point of glee. Again, these are skeletons. Yes, they look creepy, but do they have emotion? No. Ray is crafting emotion through action of these figures.
Right, that's fantastic.
It's so key to selling the fantasy. They'll often, again, utilize these tricks that we see in earlier Ray films, specifically some of his UFO films. I think he only actually has one UFO film, but the ability to suspend a stop motion stop motion figure or armature is very key, because how do you create a skeleton to jump when every single frame you are altering
Every single
it.
frame. Yeah.
There needs to be some sort of technique in place, and he pulls from his wide resume of what he's done in the past. This is, again, a masterwork of all of his techniques coming
together.
and amped up
Yeah.
to such a degree.
Awesome.
Honestly, much like the 1-on-1, the skeletons still have impact. They clash on shields. They feel great when they gang up. You see them stumble into one another and kind of eager to fight our characters. I just think, again, # keep skeletons stop motion. I actually, I think King Kong's probably the only one technically without skeletons, but I'm sure Skull Island kind of counts as a proxy, But as it was with Sinbad, these stop motion techniques could very much be seen as holding the film back in modern day. You could look at this and say, how is this ever going to compete with CGI? And realistically, the dated elements are what keeps Jason from a higher rating for me, because the dated elements do seep into the story, the Hollywood acting, the very
you can't,
classic feel of it.
Yeah, you can't really get away from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I would say by no means are these films irrelevant because of the march of technology alone. This is truly a product of an artist, and once again, respect the man, because he is driving his production, his technique higher and higher, and setting his own benchmark in an era that he was peerless.
Yeah, which is incredible and crucial for this part of the industry.
Absolutely.
I mean, for the decades to come.
Absolutely. So I think I cannot praise this enough. And while we depart from Ray to have a big jump in time, Jason the Argonauts is absolutely worth your time in modern day. We will give Jason and the Argonauts a 77.
77. Okay, I love this. We're climbing, baby. We're climbing.
That's why we got rid of one of them.
A 77, it's funny. And look, it's not that old films can't be good. I mean, you look at Citizen Kane, just so many.
Absolutely.
So many films that are good. But when you think about old stop motion, any type of weird animation going on film, you assume it's going to be bad.
Absolutely.
That's how I would take it anyway.
Yeah,
Look at an old film and just be like, why don't I watch that? I'm going to be, come on, I'm an adult here watching this. But the funny thing is, these are the reasons to be watching it.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's great to hear, and it's great to hear it has a uniqueness that can still be engaging and keep you going pretty much in this film. It's awesome.
Absolutely. And that's where I stress it. If there's an objective in this special, stop motion is a medium for storytelling, just like a cartoon would be, just like how CGI would be.
Absolutely.
And has a rightful place. And hopefully we'll get that across with these last two as well.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. And like you said, we are taking a really big, this is now a 30-year gap. We're going 3 decades, because Jason of the Argonauts is 1963. Mm-hmm. Here we have a classic that really a lot of people know, at least the name of. We have The Nightmare Before Christmas. This is 1993, and what happened in those 3 decades? Are there honorable mentions? Or you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
What is it? Or there was no forward momentum with this technology?
It specifically, this slot is focusing more on a modern stop motion perspective. In the years between these two films, we see a few progressions in stop motion. Of course, Ray continues his work until 1981 with Clash of the Titans, which could be seen as a pinnacle, but honestly, again, I won't get into it. Maybe if we revisit Clash of the Titans, on the podcast.
Sure, yeah, it could be fun.
Full stop motion films with no actors, or rather no live action actors, also hit a stride as well. On TV, we of course have the famous Rudolph and Frosty the Snowman films, which are iconic stop motion. As well,
oh my gosh,
films,
and you have like those classic. Like they're 40 minutes long typically, and like Jack Frost and everything like that. Wow, why not put those on?
So where I focus on these is definitely they hit a mark of music being introduced into the stop motion, which again is a simple thing to consider. It is almost mind-boggling to think about when you think of the actual production of how much time is being put into these stop motions.
Right.
To now have to coordinate music, huge. Mainly, though, why those type of films do not get this slot is specifically the industry that has to happen for Nightmare Before Christmas to to come about, and baby, that's Disney money.
And that's what it comes down to.
Bucks,
and I will say, because think about those, Chris. Wow, those have a soft spot in my heart.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Especially the Jack Frost. You have Frosty and basically Rudolph. You have like three main ones basically.
Absolutely, and definitely full stop motion. So an honorable mention, like you said.
Yeah, honorable. But as far as true trend setting, nothing was really new there. I mean, maybe the implementation of music, but for the most part.
We're not seeing a benchmark in the way that we need to see where this goes eventually. And Nightmare Before Christmas really is the benchmark.
Really is that. Okay.
Not only that, I think these also fill as what Nightmare Before Christmas also parodies stylistically. It's a Christmas story, but it's also kind of directed towards those classic TV movies, you know?
That's
in
true.
subject matter, and why is stop motion the medium we're telling it through? It's parodying those kind of films, and brilliantly so, to Tim Burton's credit.
I love that. And oddly enough, Tim Burton does not direct The Nightmare Before Christmas. So Henry Selick directs, which I had no idea until I sat down
Tim
here.
Burton gets this one as a feather in his cap. And definitely does a lot of story. He
deserves some
story and concept.
Yeah.
There's really a holy trinity of professionals here that I'll get into a second. But Henry is the focus. Henry Selick is definitely, I mean, if Ray is going to be our godfather to make creatures human, I think, honestly, Henry Selick is responsible for making stop motion diverse and complex enough to really sell stop motion almost as acting as and really necessary for what a musical is, which is complex singing in addition to all the coordination of the figures themselves and the technology.
Absolutely.
It's really only when big money Disney comes to play that we get this entry and why it's in my slot. And overall, I would describe this as the start of the modern phase of stop motion, as equal parts artistry and now technician kind of come into play. Full stop motion films like this do not have this polish, and honestly, I have to give credit to Henry Selick as a main lead, as the main highlight, but also many, many talented artists that will probably never get a chance to name.
So true.
But
it's so true.
Much like how I would comment with any animation in general, there's a tireless army being worked to the bone to create this, and that is definitely shown in the huge production of Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, and our next film too, which we'll get into a little bit of that. But this really was, you're right, this total, I mean, talk about benchmark.
Yeah, I think we're looking at 100 plus animators over 3 years. You know,
Unreal.
That's tireless.
Yeah. Like you said, that's Disney money.
That's Disney money. Get them to work, they'll do it. Nightmare Before Christmas, honestly, like I said, the holy trinity of creators here are Tim Burton for story and concepts, Danny Elfman in soundtrack, which, I mean, if you know this film, the soundtrack is iconic, but also like incredible. And when it comes to the director, animator spotlight, again, Henry Selick. Nightmare Before Christmas is a story about how Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King of Halloween Town, has a identity crisis. It's a novel pitch to the film. Upon the discovery of Christmas Town, just the mere discovery of Christmas Town sends him into an existential crisis. So, this movie is a children's musical, and like I said earlier, parodies perfectly the Christmas movies that may be direct comparison because of the stop motion. There really is a flawless satire here in the concept. And that is why story-wise it edges it out, but also, again, the complexity of what's going on in the animation.
And, you know, those the TV ones, they are definitely shorter. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
And you have several of them where really maybe they're together their own kind of product. But they're all similar. They all kind of do the same thing.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? But the shortness is definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, even look at Nightmare Before Christmas. With the money, with the years into it, it's still only an hour and 16.
Yeah. If really only Kubo do we get into, like, feature length.
Right.
Know?
But yeah, like you said, it's the complexity of it. It's the combining of it's
of industry and artistry.
Huge.
That's what's defining this slot, this next benchmark, if you will.
Yeah.
The Gothic designs of Tim Burton are contrasted with the bright uniformity of Christmastown. I really do think this makes for an instant classic. Not only was stop motion a perfect medium for this story for that reason, but it really pushed boundaries in the tech. It is all stop motion for one, which again is not maybe a unique feather in its cap, but scale and runtime that needs to be considered. You know, that we are talking about almost a compound interest of the time that is needed for even every second that we see on film. Not only do we see the character have the care put into the mannerisms, but in addition, music is now through stop motion animation. The big development here, benchmark wise, is verbal and facial animation.
Yeah.
We now don't need approximate or ballpark movements out of the figures over a set period of time. We need the accuracy for them pronouncing words. That is
so true.
Immense.
Yeah.
That is a workload. You know, you can't just say this is painted on mouths like you see in those TV movies. They got by with painted on mouths and maybe swapping out heads entirely. But overall, there is so much more to what Jack has to do as a literal figure, as a piece of puppetry, and to have emotion on top of that. You know, again, the story here is that he's going through a crisis. He has to show a variety of emotions in addition to the verbal coordination, in addition to the music coordination. It is such a
massive.
Juggling act.
It's like an epic. It's an hour and 16. But the feat of having to accomplish that.
Exactly.
It's unreal.
And again, I mean, I'm probably going to say it a handful more times, but this is why we watch this in modern day, because of that coordination, because of the care of these artists. These animators are artists.
Yeah.
And what they're putting into it. I believe Selick says they had to coordinate the production of over 400 plus Jack Skellington heads to swap out for every syllable, every emotion that he has to pronounce through the film. Insane. I mean, incredible. And that is, again, the combination of industry and artistry. That only happens with big money.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about the hours and hours and hours that need to go into getting 1 minute
Oh, for sure.
of video, you know?
For sure. While we don't have a lot of rear projection technique in this film, we do see similar techniques pulled from Disney's animation. The technique is rotoscoping, and we don't see much return to rotoscoping, but overall, this is when footage of someone live is then animated directly over. Technically speaking, it's what Harryhausen was doing with the skeleton and the Italian swords fighter.
Okay.
Technically, he's looking at that footage, and right in front of it for the camera, or him in between the camera, he's moving the figures for it. We see this more so for interesting animation techniques, and definitely gives it a classic Disney feel. Ghosts are cartoon, fire, shadows.
Okay.
There is a melding of styles between the two, which is great. I think the culmination of all this is in the song for Oogie Boogie. The sheer amount of movement on screen is insane. And to think all of this is being used and every frame they have to do it. You have to understand, I mean, that coordination is artistry. While Boogie's face to song animation may not be super complex, the creativity is surged into the setting of this track. Boogie's roulette wheel is always spinning. The group of 3 cowboy slot machines have individual checking slots coming at different results. It's just like, what? It's unreal. It is unreal. Overall, I think the standout as far as what the look of this set is a live black lighting that is done. This is a miniature set, ultimately.
Oh, okay, all right.
So lighting, I mean, quite literally, you can light a set however you want in the production. With this being miniature, how is lighting being incorporated in these films? for this segment, they do a live black lighting to the set, and or the miniature.
It's so cool.
And it looks so good. It looks so much better than a digital edit of a blacklight effect in modern day, because it's real. It's what they're actually projecting on it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, that's just hopefully, what I communicate is bridging the test of time there with that. As far as Selic's follow through, again, to craft a feeling, to craft a commitment. Again, I can't stress enough. 3 slot machines with their movement, and then times that by 9, because of the different slots kind of resulting. Yeah, just so amazing to see. And I think this is where Selic really earns our spot. His follow through and commitment are unmatched. This is a labor of love. This is not for the result. This is
it's got to be a little bit of that. There's reward at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. True. Very true.
But I see what you're saying. Where this is a love for
year
craft.
2 of this project, you're not thinking about awards season or anything.
Right.
It's still got a lot to go.
Yeah, you're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to miss another kid's birthday.
Exactly. Like I said, I spoke a lot of aspects around the story and soundtrack, and that's speaking. Not so. Let me track that back. I'm not speaking so much about the story and soundtrack because they are good and they are great. But the scope of this special is focusing on specifically the animation. I just understand the importance that I put into my specific words of Holy Trinity. That really is with full praise of Burton's contribution and Danny Elfman as well, who probably will get a spin-off special of his own because I've really been enjoying
I love that.
his tracks. But believe me, the mark of a great kids film, if this is what it's going to boil down to, is equal enjoyment for the adults for different reasons. Allow my praise of the visual aspects in this film to illustrate how much there really is to love for all viewers. We're going to go ahead and give Nightmare Before Christmas an 83.
Oh, wow. That's
climbing
really
up.
Good. It's still climbing up.
We're climbing.
What a nice... I'm really liking the way these are coming out.
Yeah.
Surprised you when watching it and realize how these were ending up? Or?
I'll come clean with it. Technically, I was... Because I wanted to give more time with Selick as a director and as an animation guy. And he does James and the Giant Peach 3 years after this. He goes right back into production. Another 3-year stint.
So earlier... I first said 6 was on the list, and we knocked it down. And again, kind of we're just putting it in honorable mention, which was James and the Giant Peach. Why get the cut?
So James and the Giant Peach does a 50-50 live action and stop animation split. It's certainly a nice movie, but I just felt it was a step back for this highlight. Certainly, there's a lot of unique lighting techniques done in the miniatures of James and the Giant Peach, but it's a step back because I can't exactly say these 3 years of 100+ animators to make a movie that's fully in stop motion and all this coordination to then technically step down and incorporate live action once again.
Yeah, it's just it wasn't building upon anything.
Exactly.
And these are benchmarks. These are crucial films for this genre that we're touching on.
Absolutely.
And it's not a great movie in its own sense. You know what I mean? A great stop motion movie, sure, but we're not looking for great stop motion movies. We're looking for the crucial ones, the benchmarks.
Exactly.
And it just so happens that some of these are really good.
Yeah. If anything, I thought it might have been a good spot to check out the lessons learned from Nightmare Before Christmas. Just in the same way with Jason the Argonauts, from Sinbad to Jason. I wanted to see maybe if there was development. Unfortunately, that was not the case. But not a bad movie and an honorable mention for sure.
Cool. Awesome. All right, so that's Nightmare Before Christmas with an 83%. Okay, so we have one more film here. Before we do that, we're just going to go ahead and give a pitch. Sure. We don't really do the producer segment here for these specials, but we just do want to remind people, Vin and I are operating off of the value for value model. And what that is if you're getting value from the podcast, from the special, and you find yourself going to the site and using it, you're not Googling Rotten Tomato scores or anything like that. You're checking out our site once in a while. What value are you getting from it? And if you could, you go to thedailyratings.com and go to the donations tab, and through monetary support in any amount that you want, could you donate to us? And when you donate, you can write in a note, and that it opens up a communication port with you guys. And when you donate, again, we read your note on air. and it's fun, and we're kind of trying to create something here. It's a through line to you all. It keeps us away from advertisers on the podcast, advertising on the site, which is actually pretty huge. And that's kind of how we're operating here. How we look at you is producers. Where Vin and I sit here and we host the show. You all who donate to the show, you're all producers. And also, hey, if you don't have the producer or you don't have the extra money, tell a friend.
Absolutely.
Leave something. Leave a 5-star rating and everything like that. We've all heard
Feedback,
it before.
Really, that's the whole community
It's
aspect.
huge.
Here.
It's huge for us, and that's help producing as well. Propagating the message, getting it out, getting our name out there, especially as we're getting this going. We appreciate it so much. Any little bit, all of you do. And again, for all you producers out there who make this happen, we thank you so much. And again, it's at dailyratings.com and head to the donations tab. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do our final film here. That was 1993, Nightmare Before Christmas. Again, we'd have a relatively modest jump here.
Yes.
And we are in 2016 for Kubo and the Two Strings.
Yes.
A lot of controversy around this film, a lot of praise, a lot of wowing, and just it definitely received great reviews and everything like that. 2016, Kubo and the Two Strings. What do we have here, and why does it deserve our final spot here?
Sure. So much like the time jump between our third and fourth slot, there is plenty of notable stop motion throughout the mid-90s to 2000s. Over on the UK side, we of course have Wallace and Gromit reaching its popularity during this time. That trades out the typical wire frame for its characters with claymation as the primary stop motion. It's actually a technique called plasticine, and I can be technical because I put this much time into it.
What to say it.
Allow me to be a know-it-all because I know it is plasticine.
No, I do remember that being,
Yeah. Even Selick's follow-up film, like we said, James and the Giant Peach, it's an example of innovation and music in a film, but our final slot has to wait for some echoes of Selick's career to kind of subside for maybe someone else to step up and make their mark. In 2009, Selick embarks with a new studio, Leica, and with new techniques in stop motion, much like the Dynamation was a branding for Ray back in the day, for stereoscopic stop motion. This encapsulates a lot of new digital design editing, frame rate smoothing, and probably most importantly, the combination of green screen for keying out backgrounds. Really, again, fully looping in our lessons for the techniques of rear projection. The same technique has now come full circle with green screen and using that creatively either in foreground or background. For that.
Very cool. Yeah.
We see this first used in Coraline, which was Selick's next work and first work with Leica. A wonderful movie, and Selick's actually first and only film with Leica. However, it's not until our final spot, only until he leaves the studio, do we see the second half of what now truly modern stop-motion animation is, and that is 3D printing. Once again, we have a combination of this branded stereoscopic stop motion and a production element, an industry element, and 3D animation is where we stand in with that and why we're spotlighting Kubo. With the stage set, Kubo and the Two Strings is a capital A adventure, right in line with the Odysseys of Sinbad and Jason. I think that's why I really did enjoy watching these films sequentially, because it's a return. There's no musical elements to this children's film. It is of an adventure for that, and I think that's why it kind of captured a lot of inspiration of the predecessors before. Kubo is a young boy that is haunted by his grandfather and family overall that is hunting him to fulfill his destiny. His mother is shield. His mother shields him a lot from what this reality is. However, a sickness that afflicts her here is her losing her memory, leaving Kubo to rise to the challenge. An interesting movie, and maybe at the time received some flack because it is a little bit heavy for a children's film. Is that what you were referring to with some of the criticism, or?
No, mine came from treatment of staff and animators.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Pressed for time, not getting proper pay.
Crunch. Yeah, it would
Yeah.
be the industry term. Yeah.
And not getting proper pay and like overtime pay and everything like that, and really not being treated well. It was a big problem with this studio.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. And maybe that's some of Selleck's leaving the helm. There is a lot there that you lose a mainstay of a new studio. You know, he started it.
Right,
you
mismanagement of maybe time and everything like that. But really what it comes down to, you look at a film like this, and when you're pressed for time because you're meeting deadlines, that's what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
The pay stuff is what's weird.
Yeah.
You know, when you have unbelievable hours being worked
Yeah,
and
for
not
sure.
being shown for it, but just
Right.
like still being forced to.
Yeah.
That's when it gets a little weird.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and a little much. But
That's
that's
something to note. I'm glad you're bringing it up.
yeah,
too.
it's definitely something with this movie, especially when it first came out. A lot of people, not so much like I'm going to boycott this film because of the poor treatment, but it was a sour note on the film at the time for sure.
And think about what I've even noted previously. You know, these animators deserve just as much credit as these highlighted. You know, they're
absolutely.
just as much of an artist.
Absolutely.
So, I think tying back to the story with Kubo a little bit, Kubo really confidently juggles deep emotion, and it's the core of my recommendation for both stop motion, but also a pretty ageless film to watch. To have a tasteful depiction of Alzheimer's and dementia in a children's film is no easy task.
No.
I mean, I think, fully adult films flub that handling of Alzheimer's.
Oh, you are walking a thin rope there. Yeah.
Exactly. So the fact that Kubo might be my favorite treatment of this topic because of how it is wrapped up in an adventure and fantastical elements, I hope that really does speak volume, because there is a lot here to love.
Yeah.
The story does not shy away from some heavy scenes, and maybe like even a musical, when emotions get too high, action is there to meet it, to smooth it all out. I really love the voice acting talent here. We haven't talked too much about voice acting, but this one does have a special place in my heart. Thematically, our characters are all storytellers to the subject matter of memory and living on through memories, through stories, and honestly, that ties into the tragic elements of this story. It's so wonderfully executed upon. Selling this is some serious top-tier voice actor talent.
Big time.
We have Charlize Theron. We have Matthew McConaughey.
Ralph
We have
Fiennes.
George Takei.
Yeah, Rooney Mara, Ralph Fiennes.
Yeah.
Big names. And this is a big movie. It certainly wasn't.
For sure. Yeah, Laika is still relatively, I don't know if you could call it indie studio, but again, they lost Selleck. They lost their captain, basically.
Yeah, and
how does a studio recover from that?
So who put this out? Was it that studio, and did Disney pick it up or something like that?
No.
What was distribution? It stayed this Laika studio. I kind of like that.
And that is the key as well, again, to why we have to look to industry for why this next benchmark is here.
Yeah.
Because without Disney money, how does an even more complex emotional film sell all this stop motion? And we'll touch on that.
And it's a lot of stop motion and beautiful looking stop motion.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's crack into it. I think that's a perfect transition, honestly.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the creative motif, this film has origami written right into its DNA, and I think it's a flawless match. Creates a lot of visually sharp creatures and characters that probably will look better for stop motion animation itself. Once again, we have the principles of the skeleton coming through for stop motion. And it's really just a great match for the medium, just the concept of origami with stop motion. I think it's a great pairing. If the complexity of singing was the challenge for stop motion in our last entry, Kubo's animation tackles real emotion as its goal, where Jack needed several hundred heads for singing. An even more complex scale is needed here to convey emotion and create subtle reactions to the characters, though they may not be speaking. Acting is reacting, so we need to maybe even pull back to 1933 with King Kong when those eyebrows were going on their own, no one was talking to Kong, you know. Right. Maybe not that far, but I joke. But when it comes to what we're looking at there, so much more complexity is needed, and especially that complexity is needed specifically when we're not coordinating speech. We also see the animation technique of a smear frame, where faces are swapped in and out intentionally for a distorted model to create a little bit more fluidity. We see this in cartoon drawings. A smear frame is where you would have just a blurred image of the cartoon character to fill in the gaps. So when we're watching this at such a frame rate, it's flashing in front of us. We connect the dots in our mind. Same principle is used here. The point I'm trying to highlight is that this was even only remotely possible with 3D printing, and certainly without Disney money backing them. This does not happen on a small scale studio or even medium scale studio, because they have had feature films up until this point. It does not happen at the time that we see Selick come to Leica or established Leica with Coraline. Coraline was still using hand-painted heads, and apparently they some of the early fights were around how many freckles Coraline had on her face, because they knew they had to replicate it that many times.
That's
there's a multiplier.
How small of a granular thing you have to look at it. I just have to have a microscope to these things. Yeah,
absolutely.
Unreal.
But why 3D printing is the combination with stereoscopic stop motion is because, again, if anything, as a necessity, as something to overcome adversity of losing your main creator in your studio, they needed to simplify the industry aspect. And 3D printing is there to provide a consistent and predictable and augmentable type of format for their many, many characters that are all emoting on their own. Something like a smear frame would not be possible with this, because how do you account for the many different stages that you need to create that smear frame in? With digital technology and 3D printing, they're able to account with that through the editing technology
definitely.
they have. So it really is an achievement. And honestly, like I said, why tech advancement alone should not necessarily define stop motion. That's why we don't necessarily see the focus for the special hit on what we're looking at for Coraline, even though it's another entry for Henry Selick. It's specifically the combination of actual material production that is needed for this innovation and needed for this benchmark, and why we're focusing on Kubo. For one last time, let's talk about the stop motion, the standout. We have a giant treasure skeleton. This is probably most notable because actually in the end credits, they give you a quick sped up breakdown of the real stop motion. I think this film needs it because this scene probably makes you question the most, is this really stop motion?
Is this stop motion?
We're getting that good.
That's so cool.
We are getting that good.
Because the question is, it's stop motion or wait, is this animation?
Yeah.
You want to say it's animation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or some combination of the two, and the fact that they show the behind-the-scene production for, if you will, kind of like a post-credit kind of tease.
Yeah.
That is so needed, and I'm glad they do, because it really shows the prowess in this film and the prowess of the artist behind this scene. We have some amazing, amazing lighting effect that returns from what we looked at and what we praised for Oogie Boogie in Nightmare Before Christmas. A lot of black light work, a lot of miniature lighting, which, again, I can't stress enough, has a place now modern day. Because guess what? It looks better than digital lighting. It's real lighting that you would see in any production.
I wish more people just did it. Yeah.
Well, I know. I'm not preaching to the choir for you. But there's also a fight with a huge sky serpent that, honestly, we talk about inspiration of anime or animation roots. It felt very Studio Ghibli in its movement. Reminded me of a lot of accordion-like design that is done to this. And again, we add this with the stylings of origami. It's just, it's so good, so good. And I think the standout for this Sky Serpent is just the frame rate and how smooth this thing operates as a figure, as a puppet in the production.
Yeah.
So
the smoothness of it is great. It's there's a fluidity of the film that you just would not think that you get with this type of technology, this genre of stop motion.
Exactly.
It's beautiful to see.
Yeah.
It really is. It's beautiful to see.
And I'm glad that, I mean, it's certainly there, Leica is still making films. I'm sure there is plenty of advancements to come in decades in the future. But when it comes to why I liked even capping off this special in this way is because in this Serpent, we really see, multiple times in the film, legitimately, but we really see, wow, this can almost go toe-to-toe with a CGI.
Yeah.
And again...
It's wild. It really is.
Yeah. My follow-through is, again, what is the argument? What is the case for these type of films, this type of medium existing alongside what is abundant in the industry, which is just CGI. So... Travis Knight, I would say, again, the follow-through here, there was such flourish, such finesse put through for this. We talked about, the micro-reactions Ray gave to his creatures. Because this is a drama and having amazing fight scenes for action, this is sprinkled all over the film, and honestly would be too much to even get into specific references, but Travis Knight, as both an animator and a director, has our final spotlight among the highlighted greats of the special. I really think he's earned this.
Awesome.
And excited to see what comes from Leica. I think when we talk about a movie, a big boy alert, if you will.
Ooh, okay. All right.
There is going
Pay
to
attention,
be
ladies and gentlemen.
there is going to be a new factor of some personal taste. It is the whole concept of rating sci-fi higher. I am just a man. I have desire. And believe me, you folks at home, you have my dedication to be as cold and Spock-like as possible in my critique. But when it comes to a film that has follow-through like this, personal preference is going to come into play. And maybe that's what defines... the must-watches, something that I can mix with my criticism and passion as well. As far as this film, personally, it's a story about loss. It's a story that tackles Alzheimer's and dementia tastefully and no less in an adventure movie that has excitement and really stunning sequences. You wrap that all up in this, and this is not only a benchmark for a special, but a very special movie for me as well. The film medium that stop motion is presented through, this is where we need to look to a film like this that can stand toe-to-toe with CGI and show that there is stylistically a follow-through on why stop motion is specifically being chose to tell this specific story. You wrap that all up in this benchmark experience, and I'm telling you, this will hold your eye for the entire runtime. We're going to go ahead and give Kubo and the Two Strings an 88.
Wow, an 88.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fantastic score.
Well deserved.
And I agree completely. I don't think you're out of bounds doing that.
Maybe shocking for a kid's story, ultimately, or a children's movie, but I'm telling you, there's so much how I know to a nightmare.
I mean, look at the first 15 minutes of Up. You know what I mean? Where they literally reach into your heart and pull it out like in Indiana Jones.
Right.
I mean, that's just how that is. Sometimes that's what makes the best in kids' movies. This 88 is so appropriate. I don't think you're out of line. It almost feels like you think you're out of line almost doing this, and it's making it's
more so. I think to outdo Nightmare Before Christmas is a heavy task. But I'm telling you, emotion. It needs more than just the music. Even though there's not a single song in this shows probably just as much emotion as we see in those musical set pieces.
Well, this is unbelievable. I mean, we
Unbelievable.
well, this is great. You took us through about 83 years of stop motion from the very beginning to some of the biggest ones that we've had recently, and the way it goes up with the numbers. Honestly, it's quite shocking. It's quite shocking.
Absolutely,
we're not in the 50s or below 65 in any of these. Phenomenal.
Absolutely,
it's really, really good. Folks, I just want to say, we are running long, but this is how these specials are.
That's
They're
how it
special.
goes. I was gushing over these stop-motion films for long enough.
Just want to make another point to say, folks, Vin has... He won't go ahead and bother you too much about it. He has spent hours of additional research. He's not just sitting down and watching films. He didn't just Google a list or look up a list of what are the essential stop motion. Okay, this looks pretty good. This list looks all right.
Right.
This is a handcrafted list through hours of research and understanding of the film already. I mean, you had a good idea of these movies and everything like that, but going through on a deeper look into these things. A huge appreciation for you, Vin. And that's what we say, folks. We understand that this is, one, it's just a podcast, a website. It's only once a week, and it's about movies and film. How important is it to you when it comes to your life? Maybe not that much. But at the same time, are you listening? Are you going to this site, and is it valuable for you? I mean, I would argue that this is just, if anyone even has a hint of a love for movies or anything like that, if you just literally just like to go to the movies once in a while, as I think most people do, this kind of stuff is really, really fun to do. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of work for Vin. Me, I'd come on, turn on the mics. What are you going to do? But seriously, so if again, it's thedailyratings.com, and if you go to the donations tab, again, you give $3, you give $33, you show a friend. $330.30. It's whatever you want. We have fun little set donations as well. That could be weekly or monthly. Those are kind of fun donations, like with The Godfather at $95 because it's at 95%. Jack and Jill. Because, it's $4 a month if you want, because it's got a 4% on the daily ratings.
That's a rough movie.
But again, all you producers that help make this happen, it's huge. It's what's keeping this going. We host, you all help produce this once again, and it's a big deal. It's a real producer credit for you. Just like in Hollywood, producers, that's exactly what you are for us. And, when we put projects like this together, we really want it to be as good as possible for you. We don't want to just waste your time. We don't want to waste our time doing this.
I could have just covered 5 Ray Harryhausen movies and called it a day. If anything, I put things on the benchmark on the bench because they weren't the benchmark. You know?
And that's why we exist here. Because we think no one else is really giving a damn.
Sure.
Like a Rotten Tomatoes. You know what I mean? They don't care.
Absolutely.
There's no care put into that place at all. This is a different story. We're trying to do things a little bit differently. So anyway, that's just another final pitch here. Vin, we thank you so much for doing this, what is really homework.
Enjoyable, though.
Enjoyable, yeah.
The most enjoyable homework.
But really thank you for putting this special together, Vin. Is there anything else you want to add, or are we going to roll credits here?
I think that's good. Honestly, hopefully I've communicated where this can have a modern-day viewing and just overall the objective here. Stop motion is a medium, not a style, and certainly not to be lost with the march of technology into our CGI overlords. So, but give some of these movies a watch. Let me know what you think. Feedback is what we want, and engagement with you. We want to know what you're watching and what you're liking then.
Awesome, Vin. Well, again, Vin, we thank you so much. And Vin, we'll see you next week. We appreciate it. And for folks at home, we're going to run through these just one more time here. So we have, starting in 1933 with King Kong, we have a 65%. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad with a 70. Jason and the Argonauts with a 77. The Nightmare Before Christmas with an 83. And up they go with Kubo and the Two Strings with an 88%. We thank you so much for those of you who will help produce, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating, or tell a friend about us. If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you receive from us. You'll get a producer mention on the next podcast episode, too. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. on the Daily Ratings Podcast.